Cody, welcome to the podcast, man. You're a hustler, young and hungry. You're in the multifamily space. You were on Bigger Pockets. You're always inspiring people to be and to do great things in real estate.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
Yeah. What you been up to recently?
Most recently, just bought a couple properties, bought my very first short-term deal. Actually bought two deals that were short-term, bought a resort and then bought another 3 apartments right next to the resort that we're adding on as extra lodging for our little short-term project over in Union.
Awesome, man. So short-term
yeah,
rentals, pretty much. Yeah.
cabin style, just on the Hood Canal. So we got the waterfront, we got the dock, and it's pretty fun, but it's just an extension of the multifamily business.
Right. 100%. What's your upbringing? Like, how did you get started in real estate? What's your story?
Yeah, I've been in the real estate game for a handful of years now. Been a licensed real estate agent for 4 years and been investing for 3, a little over 3 now.
How old are
But
you?
got licensed in January of 2019 at 19 years old. Just had turned 19 because my birthday is in December. And so 4 years later, fast forward, I don't do as much brokerage today, but I was the very first person in my family to ever get into real estate outside of owning a house. I don't own a house. I just do the apartments and the short-term little resort play, but no one had ever done this before. And so my entry point, someone told me to get my real estate license on a little Facebook group. So I did that. And out of that, 9 months after getting my real estate license, I ended up buying a 12-plex. It was on the MLS. I bought it at the time. It had been on the market for 551 days. It was listed with seller financing. A small little town in Washington, about 3 hours from where I grew up. Made the commute over, checked it out. It ended up being pretty nice. And so I bought it without any money out of pocket. And that was the kickstart to my career.
Yeah. And a lot of people think that when you're in real estate, you need to have a lot of money to be able to get in. And there are ways to get in without using a lot of money. And you've demonstrated that. But the cool thing about your story is you're using creative finance, which is a tool that a lot of people, it's just beyond their even scope of understanding, just like even beyond real estate, how you were able to pull it off without using any money out of your own pocket.
Yeah, the way to buy real estate, it's quite easy to buy real estate. It's a little bit less easy to actually hold it forever, not have to sell. A lot of people build their business model where they end up having to sell because they get all these obligations. And so it really comes down to answering 2 questions. How do you buy it? How do you never lose it? And the how do you buy it piece is just a function of deal, debt, and equity. When you find an opportunity, then you have to line up the debt. And then if you can't get 100% debt, you have to find the equity down. And that's where most people go to syndication. And I'm not a fan of that because most syndicators have to sell the way they structure it. So the way I opted to do it was deal, then debt, then debt. So I got 90% debt from the seller and 10% debt. As it was essentially a 12% interest hard money loan from it was another real estate agent's investor. I made a whole bunch of pitches, botched most of them, and finally got one to land. And that was a 1-year loan for $125,000. I didn't pay that off in 1 year. I wasn't able to. I thought I was going to be able to, thought I was going to be a big baller real estate agent, didn't earn it. So I begged for an extension and it cost a point, and I got an extension for a year, was able to pay that off. So it's not like it's no money out of pocket forever, but it is no money down. And that's what most people seem to neglect, or they don't include in their business model. How do you actually pay down your obligations? But on the front end, it's super easy to buy it. You just have to solve for, okay, what's the deal? When you find that, how do I get 100% debt? And if you can't cash flow with 100% debt because you didn't borrow cheap enough money, you need to find out how to bring in a partner. And I'm not a huge fan of that. But in the beginning, it was just 100% debt, seller financed with a 12% for the down payment. And that was an interest-only loan. Got it knocked out, but day one, it cashed out $800 a month. And so I felt pretty good.
Yeah. Then I think that's the most addicting part is when you get that first check in the mail or like in your bank account and seeing your just overnight pretty much making money, even though it's obviously a lot of more hard work. One of the beauties of real estate. So talk me through that first deal. How you talked a little bit about how you structured it with the 10% down was pretty much a hard money lender. But what were the terms like? How did you negotiate those terms?
With
What
the
was
seller?
approach? Yes. Because I know it was listed as a seller financing deal, right? But you still have
Yeah.
to negotiate it.
Yeah. So that seller note, it was a 30-year fully amortized fixed rate mortgage. So it's like a normal home loan, 6% interest, and they wanted 20% down. I negotiated down to 15%. We got to a sticking point during the deal, during feasibility. And they're like, would going to 10% down fix it? And I was like, yep. So it was just a back and forth during the negotiation. I didn't negotiate on price. Price is irrelevant if you never sell or have to refi. So I was like, all right, I'll just give them what they want. And we got stuck on something. So they offered to go from 15 to 10% down. And it worked.
So no secret formula. It's just, you just gotta talk about what really works for both you and the seller at the end of the day. So that first deal, you're hooked on real estate. What's next?
9 months after my first one, I bought another 12-plex. That one was off market, about 40 minutes away from. So I'd called up another owner in Central Washington. He had bought a bunch of stuff, and I just bought a 12-plex. I was like, I'm going to call someone that owns a 12-plex. So I called up a guy, and I was like, hey, never bought in Moses Lake before. Can we meet up? And I still didn't have a solid strategy. I was just trying to find a commonality. And so I met up with this guy, and he put me in his truck and drove me around and showed me a bunch of properties. And then we sat outside his 12-plex.
Some guy taking you in their truck.
It is what it is.
Yeah,
it worked out. But
yeah,
we got back and sat in front of the 12-plex, and he pulls out a little notepad, a little tiny yellow notepad, and he writes 12 numbers on it. I was like, what are these? So those are the rents. Make me an offer. It's like, oh,
interesting.
that kicked off my career. I went from Quincy, then I had bought a 12-plex in Moses Lake. And then 9 months after that, he's like, just get stable. And 9 months later, he ended up selling me his 6-plex. And so I bought that seller financed as well. Still no bank loans. And there was a little duplex that popped up on the market, little fixer for $219,000. And I called my buddy Christian. We had met like months before this, but I was like, you should buy this duplex. It's right next to my 6-plex. And I couldn't buy it. So he ended up buying that, and that got him into Moses Lake. And then shortly thereafter, I pitched him on partnering on this 38 unit that was on the market for 13 years. So we buy it for list price. They seller finance that 38 unit. And that was the beginning of my partnership with Christian, just on a whim. It was like, I know how to manage 30 rentals. I don't really want to do a 38 on my own. So if you want to join in, let's do it.
Awesome. So how did you meet Christian?
We both worked at the same brokerage.
Got it. Okay. And so you pitched him the idea, you found the deal, and you pitched him the deal got it. So that makes sense.
Yeah, it was on the market 13 years for that 38 unit. That was after I pitched him on a duplex. He owned one duplex at the time. I was like, you should buy this other duplex. It's right next to my place. Easy to manage, fix it up, rent it out. It was a great rental. And then I was like, hey, you want to do a 38 unit together? He had this goal of getting to 30 units by 30, and he was 29 with 4 units. I was like, I can't get you to 30, but I can get you to 42. And he laughed at that, and then we did it. But we bought that zero money out of pocket, seller financed as well. And we just started our journey together from there. Shortly thereafter, we picked up, I was at 68 units at the time. So now I picked up another 40 apartments with Christian since then. And we bought the resort. Nice. So that's just been over the last 12 months.
Nice. So the last 12 months, you guys partnered, you and Christian. You guys are doing a YouTube channel as well.
Yep.
Are you guys, what's the goal behind the YouTube channel? Are you guys looking to give back?
We're documenting the journey. Nobody, and this when I say nobody, has documented their steps from day one. I have videos on my YouTube channel from when I think I had just a 12-plex. And it was like day one from my very first deal. And it shows a journey. It's like a transition of what I thought I knew back then to what I know today and what I'm still learning. And we're sharing content online to show people, hey, look, you're not supposed to know everything day one. If you look at my very first video, it's like a minute long and it's super blocky and I don't know what I'm doing and I have cuts and edits. And today we just freeform it. We don't do edits. We don't do cuts because we don't need to. We just talk. And so the communication level's gotten better. The skill sets have gotten better. The knowledge base has gotten better. And we're just showing people, hey, we're real humans. Anybody can do this. And it just serves as a living document that shows, hey, this is when I first met Christian. Like we have a video where Christian and I first met each other on our YouTube channel. When I first learned how to do the math behind the real estate, I documented real estate math. And so it's just like a living doc to show, hey, everybody starts ground zero. And I haven't seen anybody do that. So I just thought, you know what, I'll start this channel and it'll either go well or it won't. Those are the options.
Yeah. I don't think people regret starting their channels. At the very least, they have a documentation that they can go back on and pretty much revisit the kind of struggles that you were dealing with. I'm sure, Cody, you went back to day one video. You're like, wow, this production quality, wow, like we've come so far, and like my knowledge base has come so far, and you can see that revolution happen over time.
Yeah. And it's fun to see the timeline, because I remember when I first met Christian, we announced on our first video, we were going to buy a 38-plex before we did it. And we call our shot, and then we made it happen. And then we said we were going to buy a 7-plex and another 6. And we did our first real estate contract together. And we started a management company. We got screwed over by this other person. We talk about our journey in real time, which has been a lot of fun. And it's cool to show people. We've got a lot of good feedback on that. They appreciate the open, honest, just journey. Because not a lot of people share everything. We've just shared it in real time.
And that's another thing is with multifamily, especially, it seems so far out of reach to do 40, 50, 100 units. And the people that are doing it, the Grant Cardones of the world, it seems so far off. You can't really relate to somebody like that on that level. When somebody like you're going through each step of the process and documenting it, it's very transparent, and it shows that there's struggles throughout the time period as well. You're not going to get every deal. Things go right for you because you manifest it and you really push yourself. But at the same time, you also have the pitfalls, and you don't want this audience to make those same mistakes, right?
And the audience will make their own mistakes. Like this, to be real, it happens. There's a lot of theory online, not a lot of practical application. My very first mentor, I won't name names, because had a falling out, and that ended up like just from his end went very south very quickly. When you violate rules, you tend to do poorly. And so that happened for him. But something he always told me was, you need to make sure you're not operating in theory, because there's a lot of theory on the internet. Theoretically, it should do well. Theoretically, this is like impossible. It's not impossible. It's very possible, for good or for bad. And I'll never lose my respect for him, because he taught me that. But the journey being posted online in real time just shows a practical application why things are the way they are. Because a lot of people in theory think that something should be a certain way, and then they actually go and buy a piece of real estate, and they're like, oh, wait, that can happen? I'm like, yeah, that can happen. So
have you ever heard of the 4-minute mile? How people thought it was humanly impossible to go under 4 minutes for the mile?
Yeah.
And then that one year that dude broke it, and everybody that year broke that, like dozens of people did it, is because they went from a mindset of, hey, this is impossible, to a mindset of, hey, this is within realm of reality. Somebody did it.
Yeah, I've got a buddy who just rounding end of high school was a 358.
Wow.
And I was like, that's pretty quick. And he had been running, like he's been a pro, like he's a pro now, but he was running sub-6 in middle school, and it was like in 6th grade.
That's insane.
I barely crossed in 6th grade, but I mean, mindset goes a long ways. But understanding in the real estate space, you don't have to ask permission to do stuff. Just do good business and ask for help when you need it. That's something most people aren't comfortable with.
And so, Cody, being young and being in this space and negotiating creative finance deals, do you ever feel as though you face some adversity being young?
No, you're going to get looked on differently in the beginning, but you just overcome that. Some people get imposter syndrome. I had that for a while. And then I realized that it takes one deal to be ahead of 99% of people. And it's really not that difficult. It's very easy to buy real estate. It's very difficult to hold it forever. And when I realized that, I'm like, okay, just give myself grace. Some people are going to look at me funny, and that's fine. But age is actually an irrelevant number. If you're going to look at any numbers, that's a dumb one to look at.
Yeah, so you look at the term sheet numbers, not the age number. But that's good. Yeah. So what do you think is like your big skill set going into this? Were you a natural conversationalist? What was the big strength that you think really helped you propel you to the next level?
I'm good at math. That's all I've got going for me. In the very beginning, super introverted, very uncomfortable talking about money, very uncomfortable communicating with anybody about what I wanted. I didn't have any of the linguistical skills. I'm not super smart when it comes to just reading people, which I definitely wasn't. And my vocabulary wasn't super great. I don't have a great memory. I didn't have any good knowledge base on history. Like I just didn't know much, but I know numbers. And something I've come to grips with is that numbers don't lie, but people do. And so if you can call people out on their numbers, people lied about it. But no, that's actually not correct. That has saved me a lot when people are pitching me stuff. Like you have to be very selective on what you pursue when you don't have any money. And not just when you don't have money, but when you don't have cash flow. Because you can have money. There's a lot of people that have money but don't have cash flow. And they have to be smart about where they place it. Otherwise, they're just done. And in the beginning, I could just say, okay, that's going to work. Because I can long divide in my head. I've been good at math since I was a kid. I can see it. That's the one thing I had going for me. And over time, as I started building out this method of just learning from folks who played the game at a higher level, taking the best pieces from their story and using it to create my own and learning from the worst, like that has improved my communication skills, just talking with owners. And that's like the number one thing any entrepreneur really needs, is to learn, okay, how do I communicate with people that are farther than I am? Not more successful. No one's really more successful. They're just further ahead in their journey. But how do I communicate with those who have done what I want to do, to where they'll not only meet with me, but they'll respect me? And that's the thing I had to figure out, because I had absolutely no clue. And if people can figure that one out at a young age, talk about the age thing, that'll just reinforce the idea that age is irrelevant.
100%. And how did you get through that introvert feeling of talking to somebody?
Practice. I learned through the art of going to Starbucks. My thought was, if I go chat with baristas, they make my coffee. That's when I started getting into coffee. So maybe if I just meet with a Starbucks barista, order something, strike up a conversation, maybe, just maybe, it'll go well. And if it doesn't, I'll never see them again.
That's really insightful. So even those small interactions throughout your day, you go to a grocery store, you go to Starbucks, those are all small moments where you can actually practice talking to people. And I'm an extrovert, and I still struggle with talking to people and feeling nervous about what the outcome would be. And it takes practice, like you said. I like that tip, though. That's something that I haven't heard yet. So
the goal is to be intentional. And for those who are not intentional people, and there's a quick way to know if you're intentional or not that I've learned, is you go into every conversation you have with an objective, and you leave said conversation with a takeaway. People who do that are more intentional than those who don't.
So what's your objective with this podcast?
Number one, wanted to meet you. But again, with the presentation, like I haven't held podcasts before. I've been on a couple, but I've never led one. And if I ever want to be able to do that, you think about flipping the script, being in someone else's shoes. I have to learn how a whole bunch of people present, how a whole bunch of people phrase their questions, what questions are more important than others. And I'm not going to get that if I'm not actively listening. I will answer said questions, but a lot of people think about what they're about to say rather than why they're actually there. And when I'm here, yeah, I'm sharing bits and pieces of my story, and people are going to get takeaways from that. But I'm learning from you just as much as I learned from David Green, as I learned from all the people that have hosted these podcasts that I've been on, because I get little bits and pieces from each of them. how they style their podcast. What's the pacing? Like, would you just jump in? Like today, we just jumped in, didn't really tell a whole bunch about the story. It more evolved over the course of the podcast. And so there's just different styles. If I ever want to be able to present from the other side, now I get these takeaways from a whole bunch of people, and I can use the best pieces that I liked from certain people's podcasts to make my own.
Right.
Not there yet. However, like it's both sided. Like I'm here to learn just as much as I am to talk. And a lot of people have to do one track minds where they're thinking about one way or another. But if you just tell the truth, you never have to remember what to say. Truth is truth. It is whatever your truth is, your reality, your fact. But I don't have to think about my story. So I'm just listening, having fun.
For sure. 100%. And I want this to feel as a conversation. That's the point of this podcast. But in general, I just want, because I personally, even before this, I never really met you. Like we just jumped in. I gave you a little intro before we talked a little bit, but we just jumped in, and I love that because now we can just have a natural conversation.
Yep.
And that being said, as relating this back to real estate with intentions, you're right. Like you have to go into something with intentions of what's in it for me, but what else can I provide of value to people? So that same goes with people that you talk to. There's a reason that people are there, right? There's people at those meetups. There's people conversing online and pushing content. Why are they doing that? And understanding those whys can actually help you be more intentional about how you can help them.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, so love that mentality. And it seems like for you, this is going to be weird, but you remind me of me when I was like 20, like early 20s. I'm 26 now. I feel old, but I know I'm not.
Oh, you old man.
Old man, yeah. But I've been starting companies since I was 14 years old. So I've been building businesses for a while, and I was always very mature for my age. And I think I've backtracked even like the more older I get, the more I realize I'm just gonna have fun with things. I'm just gonna be more loose. I don't know, putting up this front, right? And that's why I'm being totally transparent with you right now. But I think transparency creates opportunities. So I do think that it all relates at the end of the day.
Yeah, honesty and transparency. It's one thing to be upfront. People seem, just as a generational thing, they seem to be honest, but not transparent, transparent, but not honest, or neither. But I don't usually see both, where you tell the truth and you're upfront about it. So that's great.
Awesome. So what do you look for in a partner?
Yeah, it's vital to have people in your corner, just in general. But as an actual partnership, you can be partnered with people and not be partnered on the real estate. I'm not a proponent for adding steps. I don't think people should add additional folks just because they can. Most people add people to the team because they're scared. The only time you should have a partner is when 1 + 1 = 3. That is it. Theoretically, that's impossible. Practical application, very possible. Back to our conversation earlier.
Theoretically, yeah.
Yeah, theoretically, that doesn't math. But practical application, you can get more done with the right person. However, most people partner out of fear or out of thought that it is necessary when it's not. And most people don't need to partner. I partnered with my friend. He's now a friend. He wasn't a friend when we got started. It was just business. But Christian and I are partners because we can get more done together than we can without each other. We both have similar goals. We're in a similar point in life, not in age. He's 8 years older than me. However, as far as like life stages, we're very similar. And we're going the same direction. We've got a similar time frame, similar financial capabilities today. It made sense. We had similar ethics and a compatible moral compass. But really, that like most people don't have that when they meet with people. They don't even know said person. Christian took a risk on me. He leveraged his house to go do deals with me. Like he put his financial situation on a personal level at risk. So there's a large level of confidence. Most people are not willing to do that in a partnership. And that's a red flag if they're not willing to put it all on the line at an equal level that you are. That's just stuff that I look for when I'm looking at partnerships. I don't partner with anybody anymore as far as new partnerships. You're either on the ship or you're not. And that's really a simplicity of it. But one extension of that is, as far as partnerships go, there's going to be temporary partners, like strategic partners, and then there's long-term. And Kristen's a long-term. I've got some strategic partners that are here for short-term. However, you think about it like you're sailing to some new place that you've never been. You can have people on your boat, and then you can have people in their own boat going in the same direction next to you. So that's more of a strategic partner. And then the lifelong partners are actually on your boat. And you got to be very careful and selective of who you let on your boat, because it's hard to get them off.
That's key. That is well put. And Cody, with that being said, what's new for you? What's next? What are you working on?
Really, for us, we're just going to pay off the debt.
How much debt do you guys have? So you know,
I've got a little less than 12 million today.
12 million, you said?
Yeah.
That's a lot of debt. How do you sleep at night?
I mean, it's all relative. I've got 20 million in real estate. So it's like percentages. Just if I had 120 million in debt, but 200 million in real estate, it's just zeros.
Yeah.
The trick is, how do you get to cash flow? How do you get it where your debts are long-term and not coming up soon?
And so let's talk about the power of debt in real estate. You were able to leverage $12 million worth of debt to buy $20 million worth of assets. And it's cash flowing assets at that.
Yep. Yeah.
So do you go into a deal and buy turnkey, or do you go into a deal and you do value add?
I've done both.
Okay.
I've done both. However, principals I'm not allowed to sell. So I can't buy stuff that has short-term obligations that I can't afford to pay off. That's a key principle for me. Selling is loss leader. People that have a business model where you have to sell, let's just say flippers, wholesalers, it's contingent upon a sale. Or
that's speculative. Don't you agree?
It's just a sales job. People that flip they're just sellers from day one. And selling is a losing business model. It's a bad business practice. And people usually kick themselves for it. You look at all the syndicators. They build their model where they have to sell. Sucks for them. I'll buy it from them when I'm playing with agency debt down the road. But it's a bad business practice. People who have to sell lose more often than not. And so the thought is, how do I build a model that has to cash flow day one? How do I build a model that I don't have to sell? Long-term fixed rate mortgages. I did private debt, and so seller financing, that cash flows that I can pay off before it's due.
Yeah.
And that's really it. So whether it's turnkey or whether it's value add, it's irrelevant. I just have to make sure I structure it where I don't get pinched.
For sure. And that's where it comes back to your strength, math. If the math doesn't pencil out, it's not a deal. It's not something you take on. And you stick to your guns, right? You stick to your principles. You don't sell.
I don't violate them. And for those,
that's the plan, right? So that's an important concept that a lot of people don't know. People just, in the beginning, we alluded to that, where you just didn't really have a plan. You just waited 9 months and something else came up and you just bought it. But now you seem very intentional with what you buy and what you don't buy, and what you stick to your numbers, I'm assuming. So having a plan in place seems to be the way to actually get stuff done, because you understand what your parameters are for success and metrics for what you want to hit.
Yep. And for those who aren't good at math, because that's going to be something that people throw out. That's great for Cody. I'm not good at math. It's just addition and subtraction. You don't need anything else. Income, you add up the rents, less the expenses, equals cash flow. That is it. You don't need to know an IRR. That is irrelevant. You don't need to worry about cash on cash. Also irrelevant. You don't need to worry about the cap rate right now. That's irrelevant. If you add up all your incomes, you subtract all your expenses, then you subtract your mortgage, and that number is positive, and you've got a good cash flow to where you're not just cash flowing $7 a month. You just figure out what you're comfortable with. That is the simplicity of this game. Everybody likes to throw out all these special metrics like debt coverage ratios. They look at, like, I memorized all the factor rates, so I can just tell you what a mortgage costs. Don't need a mortgage calculator. Like, you can learn all that stuff, but you don't need to know it. If you can just buy based off of positive cash flow, long-term fixed rate debt, where your loans aren't getting called due. Dave Ramsey did 90-day loans. It's a poor business model. Get long-term 30-year fixed rate if you can.
Yeah.
That's the way to play this game.
Yeah. And I've heard of stories on 40-year mortgage rates coming in to play, which I think is crazy, but good for us. They come in at this point, we won't have to pay them off until way later.
40
So
years fine. Don't worry
yeah,
about it. Like your tenants will pay it off for you if you do good math. But
yeah,
the longer the mortgage, I mean, you'll pay more interest, but it is what it is. The main thing you don't want is to have debt that's due tomorrow. You want to push
right.
that thing as far down the road, and then when you can, pay it off, because cash
So,
flow is all that matters.
and so let's talk about the risks associated with the model that you're doing. So there is that what if question. If cash flow does drop off, let's say that it's a declining market.
Yeah.
Whatever anomaly happens with Detroit, right? Their whole industry collapses. There's this crazy downswing of pricing and cash flow and all that. How do you explain? Do you do the math for that worst case scenario as well? Or is that a risk that you are willingly taking on when you get debt?
I'm not just going to look at, oh, what happens if we get nuked? If we get nuked,
Yeah.
okay, whatever. It's gone. Worst practical case is rents level off. You look at history. That's worst logical case. That like this logically could happen in a worst case scenario. I buy in Moses Lake. Could Moses Lake get nuked if we went to war? Theoretically, I suppose it could happen.
Right.
What happens? I lose everything because insurance isn't going to pay out. Like
Right.
there's no way that insurance would pay out. We just lose. So there's a risk of loss, even if you own it outright. I mean, you can lose it. Nothing is guaranteed on planet Earth. And when you wake up and you still got it, it's like, hey, this is pretty great. But times change, people change, places change. So you have to make the best informed decision with the pieces that you've got. And if you don't have enough pieces to make an informed decision, you best get some new pieces. So the risks associated with it, you could lose everything. Christian and I talk about maximum foreseeable loss. We don't tie any of our assets together to the best of our ability. So we keep things independent, keep it separate. So if we lose one, we don't lose it all. I just don't want to play the game twice. So I pick good markets that have good driving indicators, not just one employer, but have multiple employers. Like the first place I ever bought had a couple small employers you might have heard of, like Microsoft, Google, Amazon,
Small.
Boeing, Verizon, Intuit, Savvy Data Centers. There's some small players over there. If there was just one of those, I'd be a little bit hesitant. But because there's a ton of them, like, oh, theoretically, they could all go away. Practical application and like real life, probably not going to happen. So there's risk associated with owning anything. There's a lot more risk when you have debt. I love Dave Ramsey's model. It takes too long to get started. That's my only problem with it. That is literally my only problem with it. We're working on becoming a debt-free organization over the next half decade. I think it will happen, but it's going to take some strategic movements of the pieces we have on the boards to get there. Then we'll scale up and we'll pay off a block, and then we'll go get non-recourse agency debt to buy bigger and compete with the syndicators and just write checks because we've got the cash at that point. But that'll be non-recourse, non-contingent of our other stuff. And then we'll pay that down and then keep going bigger and bigger. It's quite simple. You have risk when you're leveraged and you have risk when you own stuff. You could lose it. You could get in a lawsuit. And if you do bad business, you could go to prison. You have to assess the model that you're doing.
I think is a bigger risk, not taking action and being unhappy in a dead end job in a rat race.
Yeah.
That I think is more risky because, I mean, it depends on what your metrics for success are, right? Because for me, my metric for success is happiness. If I'm happy every day, I've won. If I'm covering my bases and covering my costs for what I need to do to live, I'm fine. And not to say that I don't want to buy assets and get cash flow and do all these great things, but at the end of the day, it's like happiness is the number one. Being in a corporate job that I really don't enjoy is not my form of happiness. So I need to go out there and buy real estate because that's what makes me happy and that's enjoyable to me. And having these conversations with intelligent people is part of the fun for me. I enjoy that. So it would be a risk not to do it. right?
100%. Risk the loss or you risk the regret, you get to pick. That's the
You risk
beauty of
time, man. You risk time. That's one thing that we don't think about ever because we're freaking young. Time, we take it for granted. That's, you only have so much time. It's not, oh, maybe in 20 years I'll do what I want to do. It's like, man, like time wasted, like time is not guaranteed. That's the big thing. It's time. You could, God forbid, die tomorrow. Nothing is guaranteed. Like a nuke can happen tomorrow, right? So it's risky not to do the thing that makes you happy today if you could die tomorrow by cancer or all these other parameters, right? I don't know. That's the way I like to look at things. And it's a risk adjusted return on my time. So
yeah, most people don't calculate for risk. Super, super important to do that. To Dave's point online, bunch
right.
of dummies go out and leverage to the hilt and they don't logic their way through this and oh, this could actually happen. Most people think it's just a guarantee and they see youngsters making money and they're like, oh, this is easy. And yeah, you should adjust for risk because you could lose it. And if you 100% leverage stuff, your odds of losing it are a lot higher than people like my portfolio that's closer to 60%. So you just got to weigh that out and say, is this worth it? If it goes to zero, what's next?
100%. So I do want to go into the last three questions with you, close this up. I asked this for most of the people that come speak. I might do a little additional one for you just to spice things up. But what's your favorite book and why?
Deals on Wheels by Lonnie Scruggs. That was my intro to seller financing.
Deals on Wheels
by Lonnie Scruggs.
Okay, I'm gonna have to write that one down because I'm not in the creative finance game. That's great.
It's like a $20 book because everybody keeps damaging their books and then they don't print them anymore, I don't think. So there's just a lot of demand and not a lot of supply.
Interesting. Nobody made it into like a PDF or anything.
I think there's a PDF somewhere. You could probably buy an ebook.
Got it. And why do you recommend that book?
It was my intro to seller financing.
Simple as that. Awesome.
Simple as that.
We touched on this earlier, but what are you planning on doing in the future? Like, what's your future? Like, you want to be a debt-free organization? What do you want to be a billionaire? Like, what's your goal look like? And what's the future for Cody look like?
There's no reason to pursue a billion, but I've mapped it out and we'll hit it before I'm 40. Likely before I'm 35, but it depends. We may just chill out and not do anything. It depends. If I find someone to start a family, then I'm going to be less interested in just pursuing, oh, I can just hit a billion. But mathematically speaking, yeah, I should crush a billion before I'm 40.
Awesome. What about trillion? All jokes, all jokes.
There's trillionaires already on planet Earth. I don't need to be one of them.
Yeah, perfect. And cool. So what advice would you give to people that are just starting out in real estate?
Learn how to communicate. That is the number one skill of any entrepreneur. And your ability to communicate where you're coming from, where you're going, what changes for you when you get there, and then actually to have that story get received by the other party, meaning whoever you're telling. If you can master that, like that's going to determine how far you actually get in relationship to your goals.
Perfect. And this one's a special one for you, Cody, because you just love nukes. And what happens if tomorrow you get nuked? The world, I don't know, the US gets nuked, but you survive miraculously and you're starting from scratch. What would you do differently? How would you approach things? Just in a situation where you move to Europe or whatever, and you're restarting, how would you do it?
If I had to move to Europe, start over, I would go meet with the people who own in Europe, wherever I'm at, geographically speaking. The most knowledgeable people in any given market, this is just a fact. So the most knowledgeable people in any given real estate market, it's just the people that own the real estate in said market. Most knowledgeable people are not the title companies. They're not the lenders. Lenders don't know jack. And they think they do, but if they actually knew it, they would own more than all their clients. So the most knowledgeable people in any given market are the people who own the type of real estate you want to own in that market. So I would just go in the multifamily space. I wouldn't touch short term, wouldn't touch hospitality at all. I'd go buy another 100 apartments. I think instead of 3 years, it would take 2 years to rebuild in a new place. Knowing what I know today, some people say, well, you could probably do it in a year. Yeah, if I had to do it here, I could do it in a year, but you got to go build new relationships. You got to get people to trust you. Money isn't a function of any given dollar amount or, oh, it's worth this. It's just backed on trust. The ability to go get loans, like on this resort, got a $3.5 million loan from a guy I didn't know 5 months ago. He just lent me $3.5 million, seller financed it to some kid because I was able to establish trust. You're not going to do that right away. So I would try and meet with all the players, establish some form of trust. And you do that by getting a takeaway from someone applying it, letting them know it worked. And that's how you build the relationships. And that's what I would go do if I had to move somewhere else and had absolutely nothing. Because if I had nothing, I wouldn't be able to use my track record. I wouldn't be able to use the cash flows, the companies, any of that.
100%. And starting from scratch is building the relationships. I think that's the biggest part. You would lose that, but you would have your knowledge, which I think helps. And for sure. So knowledge is power. So the more knowledge you have, the more ability you have to rebuild from scratch. Like even if you become like bankrupt tomorrow, you still have those relationships and you have the knowledge. I think that's like a double whammy.
Yeah. And the ability to communicate. This is the big one.
Skills.
Knowledge is less important than the ability to communicate. I'm never the smartest person in the room, but I know how to get what I want from people when I want it. That is something most people don't put enough emphasis on. I'm not just saying I get whatever I want when I want, but if I want a deal, if I want new debt, if I need money, I will go get it because I know how to get it from people, how to communicate, and people I didn't know years ago, like people that I'm just building relationships with. That's the key to doing this thing. If you want to repeat it for yourself, you just have to learn that everyone else and acknowledge that everyone else has what you want. You just have to figure out how do you mutually come to an agreement where they'll give you what you want.
You know what's really interesting? So I took this course on, it was like SEAL team leader, SEAL leadership course or something like that. And they made the point to show that the difference between somebody like Bill Gates and somebody that, you know, let's say is not successful in life at all, or like homeless or something like that, is that you can communicate and that you can coordinate with other people. The person that might be homeless or in a tough situation can't coordinate with themselves. That's the first person you have to coordinate with. Somebody like Bill Gates can coordinate with a lot of high level people and communicate with a lot of high level people. And that's what makes him successful versus somebody that doesn't, because at the end of the day, you have to know how to lead other people or coordinate with other people.
And get in the proximity with the right people. The question I had to ask myself a year ago was, who do I need to meet to get to the next level? And it was, at that time, it was Grant Cardone. So I think it was a year and a half or 2 years ago, actually. But then I called up their org and met with him. But you figure out, who do I have to meet with to get to the next level? Proximity matters. It's great if you can communicate, but you got to be with the right people to communicate with. So we bought this resort, Christian and I. My proper neighbor literally took 200 feet that way is Bill Gates.
That's awesome.
And then on the other side of that's Jeff Rakes. And on the other side of that is the Nordstrom family.
Nice. That's proximity.
So proximity matters.
Yeah.
So that I would try and develop that, if I back to the Europe analogy or situation, hypothetically, try and meet with all the players.
Yeah.
Because you got to be in proximity with everybody. That's what I did in Moses. I called everybody till everybody knew me. Some of them have now forgotten me because they turned me down and I didn't pursue all the relationships, but I built the ones with the people that gave me time of day, and now they know me. Like that. That's how I got in that space. You just got to pick up that model and repeat it elsewhere.
100%. And that's awesome. I hope a lot of people get something out of this. But last thing I'm going to plug with you, I'm going to plug for you. I know you do mentorship, right?
Yeah.
And that's proximity for people that want to be just like Cody. The proximity, I don't know, is there a payment required for that?
There is.
So time is very valuable for Cody, I'm assuming. And having to pay for that access to proximity is also a key player of getting to where you want to go. So if multifamily is a space that you want to do and you like and resonated with Cody, that is definitely something that you can check out. How can people reach you, Cody?
Yeah, if they want to go through that, it's just the multifamilystrategy.com. But if you just want to engage on the YouTube platform, that's absolutely free. Again, information versus application. It was always free. And that you just Google Cody Davis real estate or Cody real estate, it'll pop up. But our channel's name is Cody and Christian Multifamily Strategy, because we share our multifamily strategy on how to play the game with zero connections day one, zero money, and
Awesome.
zero experience.
Yeah. So that's how you can reach you. Awesome, Cody. Thank you so much for coming on, man. You've been a blessing. Appreciate you always giving back. So thanks, man.
Alrighty, I'll see ya.